Charlie. Welcome to the Writer's Room. Glad to have you back with us. Today, there are some more stories of my mother's. She's written down many childhood stories and has been sharing them for a couple episodes now. And we're going to continue on. And with that, why don't you take it away, Mom?
Okay. Back when we started to school, we had a long Polish name and got shortened right away. The nuns and the teachers couldn't pronounce a name with 13 letters and 2 Z's. We walked to the Catholic school. We girls were the 3 musketeers, but 2 of us had our own agenda. Jackie was creative and always had a project going, mostly art. Donna and I would walk to school together, and as it would happen, we were always a block away when the school bell rang, and we would reason, we'll be late, so no use going, and we would go back home. We were almost sure our parents would be there. We loved to play paper dolls. We would go out to the parks, and we also cut out Sears catalogs and made outfits for our dolls. Then we never gave another thought to school. I don't know how we got away with it, but we did. There were no parent-teachers conference. The nuns would ask us kids questions to fill out forms. Like I was asked, "What is your mother's maiden name?" And I replied, "She's not a maid, she's a housekeeper." "And how did you get a French name like Yvonne?" My reply, "I think we had a French maid at one time. I was good. You could ask me anything." I was 10 years old and a good student, but I was wild. Tomboy, street kid, and Donna was my sidekick because she was younger, but always willing. Nobody ever bothered us. It still scares me, some of the things we did. One of our favorite parks had a large pipe stretched across a ravine, very high, but I would walk across it and dare anyone else that was there to try. They wouldn't. Jackie devoured books. Her IQ was high and noticed by the school. In testing her, I, on the other hand, adored her and wanted to read like she did. We went to the library a lot. I loved fairy tales. The Once Upon a Time and Happily Ever After always got me. One day our books were due and Jackie asked me to take hers. She didn't mention that our brother's little pot got spilled on one of her books. The librarian was stamping "returned" when the smelly yellow urine sent her into a tizzy. I was backing up and explaining the best I could. It was just a little urine. The movies, Saturday matinee, our salvation. We went for the whole day, and there were always double features. I loved Jungle Girl, usually a comedy, Dagwood Bumpstead, or such, for a dime. You could stay as long as you wanted, and we did. A nickel, and you were set with enough penny candy to last. One time, we watched some popcorn being spilled as they found their seat, and Donna and I got down on the floor and ate it. We were hungry. And then there was always the guy that sat down beside you, and while you were paying attention, his hand would come over on your knee. We would go and tell the usher. The lights would go on, and the scumbag would be headed for the exit, a usual part of Saturday matinee. Things were going to get better. A 2-room apartment across the hall would be available, and we were in line for it. It was a bigger 2 whole rooms, a kitchen and a living room. Toilet was still down the hall. I knew how to cook. I could fry potatoes in lard. It became my meal of choice. We now had a refrigerator, a small one. We always had butter and cream for Mom's coffee. And we rolled cigarettes for both parents with a little machine. Nobody mentioned secondhand smoke. We were very healthy kids and never saw a dentist first 12 years of our life. I know we ate because Donna and I did the shopping and carried the grocery sack home. Never one step past halfway. And if you wouldn't take your turn, we'd set the sack down and walk away. We always had to run back and take our turn. It was a grocery ritual with Donna and I. Our home life went on about the same. We went to the park a lot, pumping up the swings as high as we could. We wanted to go over the top, never did. We would put our roller skates on, go a few blocks up the street, wait for a green light, and go as fast as we could to make the next green light, over the curb, across the street, down the next block, for about 4 blocks, non-stop. Jackie wasn't a saint and was always part of our action, but she had her serious side that Donna and I lacked. She butted heads with our dad, and she didn't back down. We were so well versed in having nothing to do with strangers, we handled ourselves very well. Donna and I had an incident, and it was a little old man that lived down the hall from us. We used to call him Mr. Peanuts. He would go down and visit him. We would go down and visit him. And he always gave us peanuts. One day he asked Donna and I to go down the basement to get something for him. We agreed. The basement was dark, a scary place. We went down and we were looking for what he wanted when we saw Mr. Peanuts was coming down the stairs, slow but sure. There was no way out, and we had a scary sense. There was a very big coal box where coal was delivered for the furnace. We climbed in and crawled over the coal to the street door. We had trouble with the latch, but got it open and landed out in the street. Thankful it was warm weather and it wasn't completely full of coal. We never visited Mr. Peanuts again. There was a black girl my age that used to come over to play when I was outside. She came over one day with her little brother, and we were playing in the dirt and started talking about a movie we had seen. I said, "Did you see that N-word eyes?" She turned to her brother and said, "She used the N-word." They stood up and left and never came back to play. That was the year 1941. And meantime, back on the home front, things were coming to a colossal turn of events. My dad got religion and became very sober. He attended a week-long retreat at the Catholic Church. He knew our lives couldn't go on. We kids were raising ourselves. Parents were not there a lot, and when they were, it was a bad scene. If we wanted our mom, we knew which bar to find her in. And she was sometimes trying to make a few dimes to feed us. Was losing her way. We were a responsibility she couldn't handle, and she was putting more and more distance from us. When one of us would walk into the bar, she was so proud, beaming. We were her kids. All the regulars in the bar knew us. Once it was Christmas Eve. My dad came home dragging a Christmas tree, set it up, unadorned, no decorations, and gave us each a pencil box. It contained a couple of pencils, an eraser, and a protractor. It snapped shut. We loved it. Merry Christmas. Our parents were not monsters. The times of their births and our births, prohibition and depression. Our mom didn't have a chance. She was raised in the days they made gin in the bathtub, or so it was called. Her family didn't like prohibition. She ran away at 16, had her carnival days and her dancing and singing days. She bore we 4 children at home, no hospital. She was allowed for medical alcohol prescriptions for the births. And she breastfed all 4 of us. My dad was one of 12 children, strictly Catholic. He ran away at the age of 16, lied about his age, and joined the army. My dad was older than my mother and had army discipline, and she had to toe the mark. When he was sober, We all had to toe the mark. My great-grandfather was sheriff of Oklahoma City in 1913. He and my great-grandmother produced 9 children, then got divorced. They both got married again. My great-grandmother's second marriage didn't work out, so she married for a third time. One of those 9 children were my grandmother. She died before I was born, but that is where the Bathtub Jim story came in. She was my mother's mother. Our dad saw the parish priest at the retreat and told him our plight and started the ball rolling. There was a Catholic orphanage available, but first we had to be baptized, and following that we had to go to our first confession. So we took turns to go into the confessional, and now of course the priest knew each of us and what is considered a sin. I didn't think of it at the time, but that I was breaking a commandment, honor thy father and mother, could have gotten me a few extra Hail Marys. Confession was a sacred act, very private, and we took it so. We didn't share our confessions. So our going to the orphanage was set in motion, and all our crying and begging and heartache wasn't going to stop it. The word orphanage itself filled us with fear, but with no way out, Jackie began to pack our clothes in a box. I was 10 years old, mouthy and sassy. I even sassed my dad, not when he was fully sober, but I was the one growing brave in this department. But he was a wife beater, and Jackie smothered her feelings. She was older and wiser than Donna and I. The day came we were going to the orphanage. A very pleasant lady put the 4 of us, my dad, and our box of clothes into her car, and we were off, clear across town to another area completely foreign to us. We arrived at the biggest red brick buildings we ever saw, with a circular drive that housed the office and a nursery. We were about to be presented to a new way of life. It only went up to 8th grade. Jackie was going into 7th, so she would have 2 years. I was going into 6th, I would have 3 years, and Donna 4, unless a miracle happened. Stanley could have had 5 years old till 8th grade, and he did. We didn't know there was a boy's side and a girl's side. He would be separated from us that very day. This memory still makes me cry, all these years later. Once I realized that my silent prayers, where I declared I didn't care if there were fights every night and I was sometimes hungry, nothing mattered. I wanted to go home. Futile. Even if set on my knees, I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going to be tamed and changed overnight either. But I had 3 years. The nuns were the authorities and still wore habits. They were known as the Sisters of Mercy, and all the witty wiles and ways I was using on my parents were not going to work on them. They soon found out that Jackie had a very high IQ, and her life up to now made her a very deep-thinking person, and they respected her. They would have to work on Donna and I. The whole place was huge. 2 stores for girls. We were the first floor, and we didn't really get to know the second floor girls or their nuns. Each floor had a huge dorm with individual kids' beds and a beautiful doll on each bed. There was a locker room, a huge washroom, and lines of sink and showers, and toilet stalls with doors. Everything was large. Living room with piano and parquet floors, little chairs, lovely to look at, but never used, but it impressed visitors. There was a huge playroom downstairs, lockers and benches, a player, and a xylophone. The playroom was the back door of our new home, with a good-sized yard. So much of our lives were spent in this playroom, And when you lined up to go upstairs, there was complete silence. Always the upstairs was quiet time. There was a little sewing room and a press shelves for clothing. You could talk a little if necessary. There were closets with white dresses we wore when we marched and sang as we went around chapel. We sang in Latin. I always loved those rites. You march in line down the hallway. You came to your floor dining room, then the other girls' dining room. A huge kitchen separated, the same arrangement for the boys. And before boys' dining room, there was a nuns' dining room. All the marble floors and everything spotless. If my memory serves me right, we were not crowded. And since it only went to the 8th grade, some of the older girls would leave. When the babies that were in the nursery became 3, they were sent over to our floor, or the 2nd floor, and we were assigned a little one to take care of. And there we were, a part of a well-established, very well-run home, away from home. And now to fit in. Number 1, we were heartbroken. Our little brother was put with a bunch of boys and we couldn't see him. To make it even harder, he would run over to our dining room and try calling out our names to come out. The nuns tolerated this for a while, allowing us to take turns to go out to him. But it was soon stopped and he was not allowed to come over. It didn't really take that long to get the hang of how things run. You get up every morning, went to mass, ate breakfast, did your chores. There were 3 meals a day, and I can't remember what we ate, but beets. They became the one thing I couldn't eat. Not then, not now, not ever. We were better dressed with clean clothes. We followed a tight schedule routine. Too tightly scheduled. And I walked off the premises. Of course I came back. I only did it once. The nun in charge said, "You can't walk off. Do you want me to break your ribs?" I think that was to keep me from walking, and it did just that. The nun in question became a friend in a way, someone you could count on. In the 3 years I was there, I was never touched, slapped, or spanked. I would hear from one of the girls that the nuns might say, "This looks like Yvonne's work." I found out that I was very good at mimicking and would put things, if said to me by a music teacher, I would repeat what she said to a song and dance. I always had an audience. If it was a scolding, I would mimic it in a gruff voice. And since I had an audience, I was always thinking of things to do. The 7, 8, and 9-year-olds were entertained by me, and I obliged. A few things that I put together are for summer, in captivity, we had to go to bed early. Out back, the dorm windows, you could see the mulberry tree. It had worms, but plenty of berries. I thought if we tied 3 sheets together that would reach the ground, this was before fitted sheets. There was a new flaw in the plan. How was I getting back up? But we stripped the beds and tied the sheets together, and I went out the window. And on the ground, much sooner than I expected. The sheet knots didn't hold. I forgot the berries. Get me back in. They went around to the living room window, opened it, and I climbed in. So that didn't go so well. But surely, going down the big, round, outside fire escape, opening attached to the far side of the dorm, and crawling back up with bare feet, couldn't be that hard. The bottom was made to fly open when hit. And what was a nun doing out walking when the door flew open? These were a couple of my plans that needed to be more thought out. The one that worked was we should have a midnight snack. I had the ones interested save some of their food at dinner, hide it in their beds, and when it was all quiet, we could climb into a circle, sit and eat our snacks. The nun's room was at the far side of the room, with a door that opened into the dormer. The only time it opened was if they were talking. That was not allowed. If it were good weather, we were outside. Mostly on roller skates, going down the hill as fast as we could. Hopscotch, jacks, and jumping rope. There were rules, and we always obeyed them. Donna fell one time, and I rolled over her arm and broke it. She never forgave me. The school was a regular kindergarten to 8th grade orphanage-run school for boys and girls. It was situated at the top of the hills. It was red brick, like all the buildings. We walked up the hill, back to the dining rooms for lunch, and back to finish the day. There was a school bell, and Donna and I never thought of skipping. Our old days were over, and besides, we got to see our little brother. Plus, there were boys. And Jackie was going to be leaving when school was over. There was a big statewide Catholic contest coming up, a very comprehensive test. The nuns enrolled Jackie, and out of 700 children, she finished 7th. She won a free one-year scholarship to a prominent Catholic high school, which was such good news, and it was an all-girls school. But she would be leaving us and going to a foster home. But before she left, our dad came for a Sunday visit and informed us that he had re-enlisted in the Army and would be going away. This cemented what we had come to figure out. We were never going home again. The Sunday visiting hours were what we lived for, and Aunt Grace and Mom were very faithful. Sunday after Sunday, loaded with candy. If Aunt Daphne was in town, she was there, and my dad, but he would be gone soon. If it was summertime, we visited outside, winter in the far side of the playroom. This gave us time to see our little brother.
Wow. That's some intense stuff, Mom.
Yeah, it was. It was long ago, but it was intense. It was something different all the time.
Yeah. So you in there you said like the Three Musketeers, but I grew up knowing you guys as the Polish princesses. So when did that come about?
Well, that was when we started doing crazy little things. I, as a housewife and mother, had put this great big plant in the living room, and it was sitting on a little round bottom, and I was watering it, and one day I looked at there were mushrooms growing out of the carpet, and so I said, oh, the Polish princess has struck again, and they started laughing, and that was when they started in on the 3 Polish princesses.
Okay, so that was much later. That didn't happen when you were a child.
that was much later.
Oh.
Before that we were just kind of the 3 Musketeers.
So it doesn't sound like the orphanages was quite what we expected from Annie. Having seen Annie.
Oh. No, it really
no musical
wasn't.
Numbers.
No, it really wasn't. I think in my next segment I go a little bit more into the orphanage life and what it did. It actually was the best place for us.
You know, based on what you've said, I mean, you didn't have to eat popcorn off the floor of a theater or have dirty old men put their hands on your knees. It was not being at home, but it was regular meals, clean environment, clothing.
And we were learning how to be different children than we were running the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good. It really was good.
The part about having to be separated from your brother is pretty harsh. So.
That was very hard. First day we were introduced, and they took him away, and that was very, very sad.
Yeah.
Because
he was by himself. At least you 3 kind of had each other.
We had each other.
But he was all on his own.
He had never known anything but his sisters.
Huh.
And there he was thrown in an orphanage with other children and never. Actually, after a while, he just didn't get to see us.
Yeah.
Except when we went to school.
Wow.
So.
All right. Well, some more interesting, very touching stories, Mom. So thanks for sharing.
I was always thinking of something to do. I wasn't going to settle down that easily. And,
it makes me laugh though that you were such a rebel, because I've always been such a rebel, and now I know where it comes from. I got my rebellious attitude from my mom.
And like I said, Donna was my sidekick, and she was always willing.
Yeah.
So it was Jackie that had the most sense of the three of us.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like she falls into what you hear a lot of, the eldest taking on a lot of the responsibility simply because they're the eldest, and they're forced to in a way by the parents, because a lot of times I think you've said that she would be punished if anything happened to you three, did anything wrong. She was the one that took the brunt of the punishment.
Took the blame. Yeah. So
wow. Well, on that note, we will sign off for now. There will be another segment of Mom soon. So again, my name is Charlie, and this is the Writers Room, and thanks so much for joining us. So long.